here to dig deeper into Apple's numbers is one of the most well-known Apple analysts, Gene Munster, managing director at Piper Jaffray. He's considered a Bloomberg best, meaning that we've crunched the data, and he is one of the most accurate forecasters on Apple shares. Gene has an overweight rating on Apple. He joins us now on the phone. Gene, of course, you've been listening to the call all along as well. What do you think is the single most important headline today? Is it the buyback?
Yeah, I think new product categories is probably the biggest the headline, and ultimately is that the buyback is what it is. But for Apple to be a growth story, they got to continue to innovate. And I think there's just been this belief that Apple's innovation period is at a lull or even stalled out. And I think that that's probably the biggest takeaway is that we're going into a good year.
So we're going to get deeper into these new potential product categories in a few minutes. But first, I want to ask you about the iPhone. You know, we heard a lot of gloom and doom leading into this report, and yet Apple sold 2 million more iPhones than analysts expected them to sell. Does that mean all is good in the smartphone category?
Well, in the markets that they're in, which is the smartphones above $400, all is really good. AT&T's numbers came out tonight. Their market share at Apple was 80%, which is up sequentially. The market share at Verizon was 55%. It was down a little bit sequentially, but up year over year. So all the metrics around the iPhone are still doing really well. The problem is the growth in the industry isn't coming from the markets that they're in. It's the phones below $400. And so that's an issue for Apple. And I think ultimately that's kind of what plays into the issue with the June guidance and just kind of really begs the question of when are they going to start to more aggressively go after this huge untapped market.
What about the revenue forecast for the next quarter? There was some disappointment about that. Would you say that's another issue?
Yeah, I think that the guidance for June really, from our perspective, it really was as expected. I think it might have been a little bit below where the street was at, but that really wasn't the surprise. And I think the stock really surged when they originally put the numbers out and is up a little bit now. So it's come back a little bit in the aftermarket. And I think part of that comes down to some of the comments about the strong product line in the fall, which I think people may be literally looking at that and saying, well, fall means September, October. That could create a little bit of risk to the September numbers. I'm just kind of sharing some of the feedback I've heard from investors as the call was going on via email. And so I think that I think that's probably the bigger question on investors' mind at this very minute is what's going on with the product roadmap. Good news is it's coming. The bad news is there's still another quarter in between there. That's something that we got to figure out.
What about China? You know, he talked about China Unicom. He talked about China Telecom. He didn't say anything, again, about China Mobile, yet he did say that it was their best quarter in China yet.
Yeah, I mean, the growth rates, you can kind of normalize them. It looks like 11%, but it's actually 18% based on sell-through versus sell-in. So that's probably the numbers are a little bit better than what they look like. But ultimately, for China to be an exciting market is they have to get China Mobile, as you mentioned. And he didn't say a lot. I put that more in the category of just Apple being coy about potential upcoming. And ultimately, we think that China Mobile will get announced this year.
Apple